This is Mental Selling, the sales podcast for people who are dedicated to making a difference in customers' lives. We're here to help you unlock sales talent, win more relationships, and transform your business with integrity. I'm your host, Hayley Parr. Let's get right into it. Welcome to Mental Selling by Integrity Solutions, the podcast about the mindset, habits, and human skills that drive performance in sales. I'm your host, Hayley Parr, head of marketing here at Integrity, and a lifelong believer that how you sell matters just as much as whether you sell. Today, we're kicking off another two-part series focused on an important and underappreciated conversation in the world of banking right now. And that's the gap between compliance and truly ethical behavior. My guest for this previously recorded webinar is Jack Haworth. Jack is a financial services executive, business owner, and bank compliance consultant with over 25 years of experience. He's held roles as Chief Banking Officer, Chief Sales Officer, Chief Revenue Officer, and Chief Commercial Officer. And what makes his perspective so valuable is that he's operated right at the intersection of growth, compliance, and culture. Jack and I actually go way back from our time working together at a credit union. I was on the marketing side, he was on the sales side. And he's also a really, really great friend of mine. So when we were looking for subject matter experts to join Integrity Solutions in this conversation around bank compliance and the gap between knowledge and behavior, I knew just who to call to join us. In this first episode, we're setting the stage. Why does compliance alone fall short? Where does the breakdown really happen? And what signals tell you there's a problem before the regulators show up to tell you themselves? Let's get into it. Three things we really wanted to highlight, three things we want this team to remember and keep top of mind as we move throughout this conversation. 1, compliance sets the rules, but not always the judgment. And why is that? From a culture standpoint, because banking teams are operating in more gray areas today than ever, and that impacts frontline staff. And how that translates to customer behavior, because customer expectations around trust are rising. At Integrity Solutions, we see this in the human-centric selling as being a solution to help bridge that compliance, bridge that trust, and bridge that growth. We'll get into how that all plays together down the line. But ultimately, the challenge here that we're facing isn't the awareness. And this is a key takeaway. This is going to be a thread throughout today's conversation, but I really want to hit it hard. The challenge isn't the awareness of what to do. It's the execution, the consistent execution in those real moments. So I want to pause here and ask you, Jack, how this has actually impacted your day-to-day, what you're seeing as far as an evolution in how organizations are thinking about, talking about compliance in banking today.
Yeah, I appreciate that. So, Hayley, really what's going on from my perspective is that we've seen compliance go from really a check the box. Hey, we've done the right training, we have the right resources, to an area now where regulators that come in and they focus on this, they're not just looking at the behavior, they're looking to make sure it's embedded throughout the whole part of our organization. So it's more of a culture. Everyone has to be practicing it. It's got to be more than just something on the wall. It's something that you're living every day, and your front staff really need to feel it. And there's coming those times where they just might not know what to do. And it's just not because the practices that they've done the training on, but now they're in a live situation. And I can tell you from firsthand, a large institution that I worked at, we had all of the training, we had all the policies, and we checked all the boxes, yet still at the end of the day, we had a major sales practices issue, and it was directly related to being compliant. And having your front staff being truly aligned with that culture and living it every day is the big difference that I'm seeing.
Absolutely. I think that resonates with a lot of the folks on this call. I appreciate your candor in that experience, Jack. It really highlights the importance of this conversation today. So let's transition into some takeaways that the audience can expect out of the webinar. Our goal today really is simple. 3 things to 1, understand why knowledge doesn't equal behavior, that compliance versus ethical behavior, where that gap lies. Number 2, explore then how ethics and compliance work together to reduce risk and build trust. And then 3, what can we do? What should leaders be watching out for to support risk-aware growth? Some really tactical takeaways and things to flag as you move throughout your day and start building out processes and procedures to build a healthier, more risk-aware culture. Setting the stage here with a core question, and that is the why behind it all, right? As a training company, we ask this of ourselves all the time. Why doesn't knowledge alone translate into behavior? And what do we need to do to structure solutions to address that? Jack, you can weigh in here too, but knowing the rules and applying them, especially under pressure, and in industries, those pressures can be very different and very strong in different contextual situations. Those are very different things. So, Jack, where do you see banking organizations struggling the most here?
Hayley, the organizations that I am involved in, whether it's been leadership or consulting, I'm finding that the organizations really struggle in a lot of different areas, but it's that big gap, changing where knowledge actually becomes behavior. And it's those pressure situations. Inspecting what you expect, from my perspective, is when that person that's sitting across the table from a customer, from a member, is truly doing the right thing. And they've been trained, that's the check the box side. And now it's really moving forward into being in that non-checklist decision when you could have had a chance to fluff a number to make a deal work. Instead, you're really doing what's right for the organization, what's right for the member, what's right for yourself. And that's staying in that opportunity where you really understand what it is that you're supposed to be doing and doing the right thing and doing it consistently. So I always talk about hitting a goal. And if you hit your goal, that's great, but did you do it the right way? And doing it the right way then falls back on your brand. And there's so many times you see in the news that people or institutions are getting hit for not doing it the right way. And that brand reputation goes a long way, right? It can hurt your customer base. It can hurt your employee from turnover, and you might not even know why the turnover is occurring. And it could just be because you're not doing what you say you're supposed to be doing on a consistent basis. And, how you get there is just as important as getting there.
That resonates a lot with the team at Integrity Solutions. Integrity is in our name for a reason. And it's why we partner so well with the financial services space, where that trust is really paramount to doing business, because it does have such a strong impact on brand and customer perception. So really astute observation there. All right. So this is just kind of highlighting the fact that even with financial services, and of course, many organizations have robust compliance programs internally, and that's absolutely fantastic. But that doesn't always guarantee consistent behavior. Maybe there is a gap between policy and practice. Maybe there's that gap between knowing and doing, and they could benefit from strengthening those compliance programs. So this really just does highlight the need for some additional awareness and conversations like the one we're having today. So if you don't mind, I'd like to move forward into this next slide, which is kind of talking about where it hits hardest the most. And that is the bottom line. Compliance as a strategic lever, right? Because we put this quote on the right, think compliance is expensive, try non-compliance. It gets expensive when you're hit with a fine or a fee, or your trust impacts your reputation and your culture and your growth, and all of a sudden things go sideways. So, Jack, we've talked some horror stories, and you don't need to talk any specifics here, but it's obvious that compliance is now a strategic function. Regulators are watching more closely, and the best firms are aligning all of these systems with leadership and frontline judgment. Anything specific here related to strategic growth and non-compliance and the bottom line. From your perspective, what does that shift look like in organizations today?
Yeah. With everyone that I do consulting with, what I'm seeing the most is that compliance officer isn't just sitting in a corner, making sure they're doing the FDIC audits and the checklist. They're actually involved in those sales meetings. They're involved in the strategic planning. They're integral so that you're checking blind spots consistently and really doing a dovetailed plan together. So it's just not an afterthought. It's on the forethought, right? It's in the foreground. How it falls out, though, is where you see it in your surveys with your employees. And a lot of institutions, you'll find when you go and consult, you'll say, so where are your surveys? And they'll say, well, actually, we don't do any. And, Hayley, it's like, well, why not? And you find out that they really don't want to know where they're sitting. If they wanted to know, they would do them. And it's really a culture, right? So that whole idea that my employee base is turning over, well, I really don't want to know why. I don't want to solve that problem. Because when they find out, it's really traditionally somewhat embedded in a compliance issue that permeates throughout the whole organization. And you want to be able to change that culture. And it's a process, right? And I think when you see that decoupling of compliance on one side and sales and on the other side, that's where those issues really start occurring. It's where you actually have those dovetailed together that everyone understands your organization, that you're doing it and you're doing it the right way. And that's where it shows up every day. And at the end of the day, your culture isn't what you say it is on that board or on your card. It's really what that customer or that member tells you it is. And that's from either repeat business or referrals or just asking them directly, hey, could you tell me more about what our culture is? And I think that's that shift that I've seen because it is so expensive. And just doing it the right way, while there might be layers in order to get it done the right way, it really allows for less issues in the future that you have to go back and rectify because they will be found. You will have something that comes out eventually.
So, Jack, you're telling me that earlier in my marketing career at the credit union, when I was sat right next to the compliance team, that was intentional and not just in place to make my life harder to get all my campaigns approved much more slowly. You're saying an intentional move? Okay.
What's happening, Hayley, is that people need to inspect what they're expecting. And if you expect that culture of compliance and you expect that culture of doing it right, you have to be inspecting it. And that's just not post, right? That's every day. Make sure you're getting what you want.
Absolutely. Let's pause here for a moment because what Jack just described is something I think a lot of leaders in banking and financial services recognize, even if it's not always said out loud. You do the training, you check the boxes, you have the policies on the wall and the modules in your LMS. And yet people might still make poor decisions under pressure, not necessarily because they don't know the rules, but because knowing and doing are two completely different things. Jack used a phrase I keep coming back to: inspect what you expect. According to Jack, the focus should be less on surveillance and more on showing up to be present enough in the day-to-day to actually see whether culture is real or just a tagline. And that idea of culture not being what you say it is, but what your customers say it is, that's something that really hit differently in this conversation. As marketers, we often think about your brand as something that needs to be built and amplified. But I think Jack's reframing is equally as important. The most honest version of your culture and your brand really lives in your customers' and employees' experience of it, not just in what you broadcast. So coming right up, Jack shares a firsthand account of a major sales practice failure at an institution that had all the training, they had all the policies, they checked every single box. It's a story that illustrates exactly why this conversation matters. But before that, a few things on AI. So you gave a really good example on the earlier slide around one kind of red flag of an issue present being the lack of surveys because you don't want to know. You're not inspecting what you expect. One other example that you and I talked about prior to today's conversation that kind of shows up was this idea around beyond checklists and in the, the banking or the credit union space, specifically around loan decisions and needing judgment beyond checklists. These are the examples of how gaps could show up in decisions under pressure that maybe aren't so black and white and require some more ethical human judgment. Can you dig into that? Because I think your experience really highlights what it means to operate with ethics and how that comes to life in the field.
There's several. You're looking back on a 30-year career, you've seen these kind of things happen over and over. And honestly, this just came up in one of the inspections I was doing for a bank. The whole understanding of ethics should be known throughout the organization. And it was known in the organization that there wasn't ethics. And so much so that there were customers that would come and actually provide funds that would never hit the account in order to get the loan approved on the commercial side. When you think about that, that was systemic. And then the exit interviews that I was conducting were showing that everyone knew about it. It wasn't like it was only in the commercial department. Everyone knew that that was occurring. And so then you look at kind of what's happening in today's world. You want to embrace AI. Everyone is trying to embrace AI. I know I do. And from an AI perspective, you can really rely on AI to be everything for you. But as soon as you do that, you've lost the human interaction. And really, AI should be your thought partner as you're going down the path to allow for higher efficiencies. And one of the boards I sit on at Ball State University, they talked about their students and they gave their students all the opportunity to use AI. And I'm like, wow, that's interesting, because my son actually goes there. And he said, yeah, it was kind of crazy. I got to do all these reports and I got to use AI. I said, well, how did it help you? And then I went back to the professors and they said, what we found is that the C students actually became worse. They actually became D and F students. And the A students were still A students, but they were able to do more with their time. They could be more involved in different things on campus. They could actually do a job as well. But those C students were asking AI to really not only do the work, but also teach them, because they didn't know how to utilize it. So when you're talking about beyond checklists and lending, for example, you can maneuver numbers to make your loan get approved. And if you're not walking side by side through that process, it can really lead to a lot of issues within your organization. You can have bank failure. I mean, number one, that could be the ultimate. You can have customers leave because they know that you actually did them an injustice. You put them in a loan that they actually didn't need. They're looking for you to be their sounding board. So I think those were a couple of the examples that we had talked about.
Yeah, absolutely. And actually, this next slide mentions AI. I think we have another one further in the deck. I was hoping you would bring that example up because it really struck me around how modern pressures like technology are shaping decision-making and how we have to remember to use these tools to help us as partners and not replace the human decision-making of it all. This is really where in the field leadership comes into play. And you obviously have a lot of experience with this in having to ask those tough questions like the evolution of compliance across financial institutions. Is there anything else here around where there's still some gaps between policy and practice, or any additional signals that we wanted to call out that show alignment in a healthy culture related to gaps between policy and practice?
There's a lot of different signals. It just is how well you're listening to them. And a lot of times organizations are kind of blind to them because they're always going, I need to hit this number. I need to hit this return. I need to provide X to the shareholders. But if you're truly listening, you'll see that you'll have turnover in employees. And it might be in one area until it isn't. And you'll see that be systemic. It might be in your employee engagement surveys that you're doing. It could just be in your lack of ability to gain wallet share in a certain area as well. I think they show up in all different areas. From gap perspective, the daily checklist is definitely something, because you go from having, all the knowledge and doing all the different compliance training and webinars, and you have 100% everywhere. And then all of a sudden you're seeing there's some failure and you're wondering, where's my gap? Why do I consistently have this failure? It's because you're really not inspecting what you expect, and you expect it to be culture. So part of that is having leadership. Culture starts from the top and goes down, right? So it's the top truly doing what they say they're doing and not talking out of two sides of their mouth. And we've been involved in organizations where we've seen that, right? Hey, this is what I'm saying here, but this is what I'm saying behind closed doors. And when they're not in sync, that's where you start seeing all the different things that spirals outward. And it could be, well, I'll chalk it up to this until you really uncover and peel back the onion. You really get back to, hey, there was a pressure situation, right? I had to make a decision. I had X number of checking accounts I needed to open this month, and I found a way to hit my number. And people turn a blind eye to it until they don't, right? So you have to inspect that piece. And I think that's what you and I keep talking about is how do you go about doing that? That's the secret sauce. Well, if you really believe in it, then you find your way. Even as an executive, setting strategy at the top of the house all the time, there's a way you can connect to the culture, and that's meeting with a customer or member. You can see what's going on. You can go out with one of your team members. You can go on the front line. That's how important it is. And if it's not that important, then you won't be inspecting and you'll have these penalties and fines. And some institutions are okay just paying them consistently. And I've seen that too, which is a whole different way to manage your compliance team. I'd rather not do that.
Sounds expensive. I'll say I've definitely written down inspect what you expect since we spoke, because that hit hard. I think we can all put some more rigor in that area of our life. Well, many areas of our life.
Well, it means different things to different people too, Hayley. I mean, some people inspect it by numbers, and I don't know if you can inspect those kind of things that way. I think you really have to, from a culture and a compliance perspective, you have to go see it.
And that's where we'll leave part 1 of our episode on compliance, with Jack's challenge ringing in our ears. You have to go see it. You have to feel it. You have to experience it. Because that's the thing about culture. You can't manage it from a spreadsheet. You can't inspect it from a corner office. And you definitely can't fake it. Not to your regulators, not to your employees, and certainly not to your customers. That gap between knowing the rules and actually living them, it doesn't close itself. It closes when leaders decide that showing up, really showing up, is part of the job description. In part 2, Jack and I get into the practical side of all of this. We talk about what human-centric selling actually looks like in a banking context, why the reinforcement piece of your training strategy is the one most leaders quietly skip, and the practices that make ethical decision-making actually repeatable and scalable. If today's conversation resonated with you, I'd love for you to share it with someone in your organization who needs to hear it. And if you're sitting with a question about where your own culture stands, hang on to that. We're going to give you some real tools to work with in part 2. I'm Hayley Parr. Thanks for listening to the Mental Selling Podcast, and we'll see you in the next one. And if you're looking for a way to accelerate sales performance this year, we invite you to build your sales performance roadmap aligned to your goals and designed to close skill gaps, strengthen customer trust, and deliver measurable growth. To learn more or get started, visit integritysolutions.com. Thank you for joining us on Mental Selling. If today's conversation resonated with you, be sure to subscribe, leave a review, and share it with your network. For more insights on how to go beyond winning deals and build real customer relationships, visit integritysolutions.com. See you next time.